Was there a gay agenda and did it succeed? I'm Jamie Bambrick, Editor-in-Chief for Clear Truth Media, and Rosaria Butterfield recently wrote an excellent article for World magazine entitled The Long Game, 20 Years of Same-Sex Marriage and the Moral Revolution That Made It Possible. It's really interesting in no small part because she is a former queer theorist professor who was heavily involved in this movement at that time. Got saved, left that lifestyle, is now a married mother and all-round godly woman, and may be appearing on this channel very soon. Not this video though, unfortunately, but soon, whether she wants to or not. Okay, she does want to. I've talked to her about it. Hi Rosaria, if you're watching, good to see you. Anyway, one of the things that she gets into is the moral reformation that has happened in the Western world that took us from, in the mid-90s, the Democratic Party and Bill Clinton signing the Defence of Marriage Act, saying that marriage is between a man and a woman, to today where we have gay marriage in every single Western country. That is a huge moral shift. Now, talking about this is potentially scary. There is a chance that the YouTube algorithm instantiates itself into a robot that comes to my house and seeks to erase me and my entire existence. But I had a clever idea. What I have done is I have got a Google-approved filtration chip that I have implanted directly into my amygdala. Is amygdala part of my brain? I think it's part of my brain. Anyway, some part of my brain somehow. And if I am about to say anything that is not regime approved, it will say something different, and you'll probably not even notice the difference. So, was there anything resembling a gay agenda? No, it is a right-wing conspiracy promoted by bigots. There was, however, a book which Rosaria mentioned, which was very famous at the time, and was called After the Ball, How America Will Conquer Its Fear and Hatred of the Gays in the 90s. It was extremely widely read in that community and basically functioned as something of a playbook for what we've seen in the last 30 years. And I'm going to go through what Rosaria did, which was summarize it into sort of 5 main points as to the strategy. So point 1, this is taken from Rosaria's article. Keep the message focused on the normalization of homosexuality. The authors declared it in plain English: no public sex and no gay disturbances. Weird that he's mentioned in public. Until gay marriage is the law and Christians see us as victims. So basically, one of the main impediments to this agenda is basically the ick factor, and in order for it to succeed, that needed to be removed. So whilst throughout the sort of 80s and really from the 60s on until this point in the late 1980s, early 1990s, gay people have been much more out there about their promiscuity, but for the sake of the agenda, they basically said, well, we're going to keep things much more in check and act much more normal. And we've seen plenty of examples of this. We see it in things like Will and Grace, which was just Friends but with gay people. We see it in things like advertising. And all of this is to basically convince us that homosexual behaviour is pretty much the same as heterosexual behaviour, just with a different gender. Here is what the authors of the book actually wrote. We can extract the following principles for our campaign to desensitise straights to gays and gayness, inundate them in a continuous flood of gay-related advertising presented in the least offensive fashion possible. If straights can't start off the shower, they may eventually get used to being wet. Similarly, with a rank odour smelled upon entering a room, if you can't get rid of it, you eventually cease to smell it. Sounds like my car. I have young children. It smells of crumbled up food, right? But this has really happened and really been affected. I was talking to some older folks recently, and they basically talked about the idea of finding same-sex behaviour something that grosses them out to some extent. But I had to explain to them that actually amongst those under 30, that really doesn't exist. That isn't the reaction they have at all. So that point definitely has succeeded. Point 2, again from Rosaria's article, find easy to manipulate churches, especially mainline Presbyterians, thank you Presbyterians, to get on board and to help promote the idea that gays are victims. It's amazing that these guys rightly understood that fundamentally what this movement was about was a spiritual war against Christianity, that Christianity formed a bulwark against this. And the aim was not to take on churches in some sort of direct battle, but rather to primarily attempt to subvert churches and to compromise those that could be compromised using the language and the ideas of Christianity, things like victimhood and justice, and making it a Christian obligation to join the cause. They also said that they wanted to try and change church theology. Here's what the authors of the book wrote. This entails publicising support by moderate churches and raising serious theological objections to conservative and biblical teachings. It also means exposing the inconsistency and hatred underlying anti-gay doctrines. And this is interesting, right? Because when you see liberalising churches have a shift of doctrine, it never seems to be on mode of baptism, doesn't seem to be on communion, doesn't seem to be on even something like the Trinity. It really seems to be exclusively about this issue. Now, why is that? This isn't the only doctrine of the church. Statistically, you probably wouldn't find that if this was something happening naturally. But it's not happening naturally. That's why we're seeing this. This is being driven. And it started off in the most liberal churches, but then it grew more and more into more conservative denominations, so that even today in the ostensibly conservative PCA, you see things like the Revoice movement advancing this agenda. Okay, point 3. Give potential protectors a just cause by reassuring Americans that the issue is anti-discrimination, not gay rights. So 2 big points in this regard. Here is what the authors of this book, who were advancing this gay non-agenda which doesn't exist, okay, I haven't said anything that the algorithm would not like. I want to make that very clear. Here is what they said. We argue that for all practical purposes, gays should be considered not to have been born gay, even though sexual orientation for most humans seems to be the product of a complex interaction between innate predispositions and environmental factors during childhood and early adolescence. This idea has been totally accepted. People today believe that if you're gay, it wasn't you what done it, it wasn't anyone else that did it, it was nature, it was God, magic, whatever it might have been. Nothing could possibly change it, and therefore for it to be treated differently is discrimination, right? Another area in which this discrimination argument was used was in that of gay marriage. You may find it interesting that there was a big split in the gay movement in the late 80s, early 90s regarding what they thought about gay marriage. Most people actually weren't particularly for it because they viewed it as some sort of vestige of heteronormativity. Why would anyone want to do that? But Rosaria herself said that while she wasn't personally really interested in that, she did see that it was politically expedient, and the reason it was politically expedient is because you could then make the discrimination argument. Now, does that argument hold water? Well, not really. It's not like people were being barred from marriage in the way that, say, interracial marriage was being prevented. What was happening was the definition of marriage was being held to, that being a union between a man and a woman. And this was a movement not about equality of marriage, but about changing the definition. Okay, point 4, here's from Rosaria again. Make gays look good by reclaiming or inventing a noble history. Anyone single, over 40 and dead could be marshalled to the cause as a gay forebear. And we can go straight back into the book after the ball, and here's what those authors wrote. The honour roll of prominent gay or bisexual men and women is truly eye-popping. Famous historical figures are especially useful for us for 2 reasons. Firstly, they are invariably dead as a doornail, hence in no position to deny the truth and sue for libel. Second, and more serious, the virtues and accomplishments that make these historic gay figures admirable cannot be gainsaid or dismissed by the public, since high school history textbooks have already set them in incontrovertible cement. By casting its violet spotlight on such revered heroes, in no time the skillful media campaign could have the gay community looking like the veritable fairy godmother to Western civilization. This is of course a big deal because the stories we tell ourselves about where we've come from and who our heroes are and what's good about our history, well, it shapes our understanding of ourselves as nations and as individuals. Now, number 1, these stories should in fact be true. And number 2, the true story of Western civilization is that the quote-unquote fairy godmother of it is Christianity, that everything good from our history has flowed out of our Christian values and morals. This, however, was a clear attempt to supplant that. All of the good people from history, they are now portrayed as being gay or secretly gay or at least liking 90s house music. All of the bad people, they're Christians and they are bigots. I think if you ask the average high schooler today who had a better influence on history, Christians, or the gay community, I think I'd actually say the gay community. This has very much succeeded. And point 5, once again taken from Rosaria's article, make victimizers look bad. Create a media link, for example, between Nazis and hysterical backwoods preachers, and distinguish this from open-minded pluralists and liberal loving pastors. And in the book, and we'll throw the quote up so you can read it, but I won't read it verbatim, they talk about this idea of essentially juxtaposing nice, normal, loving gay people who are victims and then wild-eyed, horrific, evil, bigoted Christians, right? And have we seen that? Yes, absolutely we've seen that. The media, when it looks at Christianity, focuses in on the sort of most extreme, weird versions of Christianity, the Westboro Baptist, the Stephen Anderson types. They get a lot of airtime. And they basically use that to paint everybody in the church who doesn't agree with that same brush. So that has too been pretty effective. So there you go, there are 5 key points summarising this book after the ball. There's a lot more to be done on this topic and this book. However, I can hear the killer robot scurrying around outside, and I would just like to say that there was no agenda, and if there was, it did not succeed. None of these opinions, by the way, are my own. I think I should attribute them to who should the robot go after? Justin Trudeau. That's who came up with this. None of these are my opinions at all. If you like the video, please don't smash the like button. Just tap it normally. It'll work just the same way. You can subscribe, retweet, whatever you do on the platform that you are on. If you want to support the channel, please grab a t-shirt from wearecontramunum.com or head over to Clear Truth and check out all of our stuff there.